We started to feel the pressure of that. Fundamentally, competing is harder than it was.
Welcome to Top CEO. We're chatting with Ed Jennings, CEO of QuickBase.
It's hard to be great if you're doing too many different things. So many SaaS companies emerged and they got more and more specific, more and more granular to solve really narrow problems, which makes sense. We started about a year ago to really feel this tech recession. It started to really dig in.
What did you see? What did you notice?
This was actually pretty galvanizing because we had to make a lot of choices of what we were going to stop doing, what types of customers we're going to focus on, where we're going to put investment. Superpower of a CEO, I think one of them has to be in galvanizing people behind a big idea. And that takes time and energy and saying things 10 different times in 10 different ways. The evolution of SaaS is...
And Ed, first of all, you've been, senior leadership positions at a number of tech companies, some kind of purchased by private equity, and you've brought in as part of that. What is your definition of a CEO? What does a CEO do? What is your role in the context of these companies?
Yeah, well, first, hello, Ben. Great to be on today. Thanks for having me and excited about our conversation. With PE-backed businesses, a lot of times it's really a business in transformation. It's we'll come in oftentimes shortly after they invest in a business, and the aspiration is how do we take wherever it is today and dramatically increase the value? And usually it's a mix of common things like bring and elevate the team. A lot of times it was a tech business that was started by a founder, and a lot of times it's growing that development in that leadership team and some of their leaders. A lot of times it's about evolving a go-to-market model. Maybe they've been sort of in one country and we're expanding globally. Maybe they've been very just PLG led and they want to expand into enterprise and other kind of markets. Maybe they've sort of just been small and they're just trying to scale that go-to-market team. And a lot of times it's about really getting the market strategy right. And there's a lot of time getting more focus on a market strategy that's narrower and tighter. And so I love partnering with PE firms coming into our organization, and a lot of times we'll dramatically increase the value and sell it. One time, my last one with Mimecast, we ended up taking that business public. So different sorts of outcomes, but it's always focused on how do you create value? How do you take a great company, a great team, and really get them to a lot more opportunity for them.
And how do you describe maybe the opposite of that, which is like blockers to value creation? What are the kind of things you see when obviously a company, if private equity has purchased them, they're a desirable company. There's a reason why they would want to own that company. But what are the blockers of that are helpful to have, I don't know, a new CEO, a different perspective, different than the founding team? What are those blockers that you try to get past?
Yeah, let's say a couple for sure. There's a little consistency in sort of what we find in areas that I focus on when I come in. And so first and foremost, it is always about leadership. And so sometimes there's the opportunity for new leaders that come in that have actually not maybe started a business, but have taken a business. Oftentimes it's, the last 3 companies that came in were about 80 to 100 million in revenue. And the idea was, how do you get that to be 300, 500 or bigger? And so it is such a hard and unique thing to create a business. It's such a hard and unique thing to build a team that takes something from 0 to 50 or 100. It's a different set of challenges. It's a different set of leadership. It's a different set of leadership requirements to take a business from 100 to 500. And so a lot of times it's evolving the team, the cadence, their teams. The exciting thing about high growth software is there's so much opportunity for people who are there to grow within the org. But a lot of them are big management jobs. They've never had any sort of coaching or training on how to lead better, how to manage better, how to coach people, how to bring their people along. And so there's just usually a lot of unlock in focusing on, do we have the right people in leadership? Are they doing the right things? Do we have a cadence that we're actually working as a team? Do they have the right team? So that's a huge part of the unlock. The other one is go to market. There's almost always an opportunity to either rethink how they're positioning or marketing, rethink how they're going to market channels and sales, rethink how they're doing customer success, especially in a SaaS organization like QuickBase. There's always opportunities to say, hey, what got us to this point? There could be more and or better ways to increase, and grow from where we are there. And then finally, and this is one we'll talk about a lot because it's a big part of the journey here in particular at QuickBase, it's just market strategy, getting ironically more focused. Usually I come in a business and they're at 100 million and they're too broadly focused. And it's about getting them much more tightly and narrowly pinpointing like, what's our ideal customer profile, exactly the persona, and how do we win there disproportionately versus trying to do too many things and be too many things for many different buyers.
And you think, and that's different. I mean, usually you need to focus down, but in this case, you're broadening the vision, or you said it's not normal as much. I know you have sort of more of a vertical based strategy or sort of verticalizing things. How is this different than what you typically experience?
Yeah, no, in almost every case, it's getting more specific. It's funny, internally we have this notion we're saying like, based on that show, How I Built This, which I know you know and love, a lot of entrepreneurs. It's a great show. I love those stories. And this is more like how I verticalized this. And I use I, it's never I, it's always we, but the notion of we went from being a very broad approach to the market. Essentially, we have a platform that allows non-developers to write software. I mean, our initial genesis of a business 20 years ago was the world's all being digitized. The world's all building applications to run their business. But most people, 99% of the world doesn't know how to write software. So they didn't know anything about HTML and CSS and SQL databases and a lot of the infrastructure knowledge that you need to write software. And so our initial value prop was help business people themselves write software that they can use, even though they don't know anything about software. So a very visual environment, no code is the description of the category of just they can work and build software solutions as easily as working in Excel. And so that was the original premise. And now we're up to about 12,000 customers across tons of industries, tons of functions, different large Fortune 10, all the way up to, startups of 3 people. And so we had a really broad set. And for us, it was, how do we get more narrow?
Well, and when a company goes through that, how do you think about sort of, it feels like you're closing off opportunities, right? You're like, we could get this sales, or, we could get this here. Oh, we have an existing customer here. How should CEOs think about that? Like getting focused in the value of it, where it seems like you're precluding opportunity. And maybe when you were doing your original, pitch deck to investors or something like that, you were like trying to make the biggest addressable market size you could in the world, right? You're just like, we could do all of these things. We're going to be a massive company. Is it hard for people to try to focus?
I think so. I think that's why there's always that opportunity to come in later, after they've had success. A company that's gotten to 50 to 100 million is rare. There are very few that get that large in the software space. And so they've had a lot of success to be there in the first place. But ultimately, I think entrepreneurs, as I've understood it, and the companies that come into, they've run into, as he said, increase the TAM, have the biggest possible story. But it's hard to be great if you're doing too many different things. If you look at the companies that have really excelled, the companies that have really stood out, especially even look at, McKinsey does these studies of how many software companies get to 100 in revenue, get to 500, get to $1 billion. Usually they get to 200 to 500 in that first core application, that first fundamental business premise. The ones that start to dilute it too fast, get in too many markets, it gets really complex, it gets expensive, it gets hard to deliver performance when you're trying to do a lot of different things for a lot of different customers. It's hard to do them well. And it's like the hyper competitive space that we're in and the market that we're in. I believe, and I think we've seen, historically, that most software companies be great at fewer things. You'll have more success than being pretty good at a whole range of things.
Well, and so how do you describe sort of software as a service and the kind of unique aspects of building customers, marketing, growing it? What is unique to software as a service, that kind of space? And then we can talk about sort of like kind of the no code space in particular, but what should CEOs or others know about kind of SaaS businesses and what makes them successful?
Well, I think it's an evolution of where enterprise software in particular has grown over the last 4 or 5 decades. I think it started out as everyone wrote their own, and it was a very expensive and hard process. And they started to realize that a lot of this shared infrastructure, you could deliver software better, faster, cheaper if you put it in a shared environment. I think what we're seeing now, though, is so many SaaS companies emerged and they got more and more specific, more and more granular to solve really narrow problems, which makes sense. But a lot of enterprises, the average, we do surveys of enterprise software companies, there's 77 average sort of applications within your typical US enterprise today. That's a lot. That's a lot of complexity. That's a lot of different SaaS solutions. So now in 2024, what you're starting to see is a little bit of a consolidation, a little bit of a simplification of enterprise SaaS platforms. So just too many. And in each one, it's expensive because you pay per seat if you've got 77. Each one has its own data structure. So if there's fragmentation, it's tough to see across these applications. And so you're seeing a lot of trying to find bigger platforms that can have multiple components to them and a consolidation of vendors. So I think the evolution of SaaS is phasing into another stage. And for us, we've been a beneficiary of that. I mean, I think a lot of our growth, even through some tough times, has been people are trying to simplify. They're trying to get on the fewer, bigger platforms that can do a range of applications and someone of scale, that the platform provider can solve a couple different problems for them. And so it's been an effort for us to help companies save time, save money, and simplify by consolidating a range of things they could build with QuickBase.
Well, and so what has been the journey like? I mean, you became CEO sort of in, I think, May 2020, which is we're kind of like, the pandemic's going on. We don't know the scope of it. People are suddenly shifting to remote work and they're conserving cash, and there's a lot of unknowns, but then some businesses are certainly like growing. So what has been the journey kind of past 4 years for QuickBase in sort of the eras leading us up to where you are now?
Yeah, it's as I think a lot of I've seen some great interviews you've done in other podcasts. Like a lot of us, the last 4 years have been crazy, from pandemics to social disruption to you name it. Now we're in the recession. I mean, there's been a lot of things going on. It's funny that the first 2.5 or so years were pretty straightforward. I mean, like those areas I was talking about, focus on leadership. Let's get our go-to-market motion going. We spent a lot of time and we saw good success. I mean, we saw a great team come together. We started to really accelerate our growth. We saw our retention of our customers growing, and we were proud to get to that. They talk about rule of 40 in SaaS, which is the sum of your growth rate, your revenue growth rate, plus your EBITDA margin. So it just shows a balance of you're growing and profitable. And so you want to be rule of 40. We were rule of 50. So we saw a lot of that. It was interesting. We started about a year ago to really feel this tech recession. It started to really dig in. That was a little bit of a come to Jesus moment for us. I could talk about it. So it was sort of up to about 2.5 years ago. And then there's been the last year and a half and sort of and that was really the catalyst for us moving down this vertical path.
Well, take me through it. What did you see? What did you notice? And how did that bring you to sort of like, we need to go conquer individual verticals? So
as we started to see, tech buyers scale way back, as we started to see sort of this rationalization of just postponing decisions. And there was, and a lot of, I think there's about 140 publicly traded SaaS companies. So we can see obviously all their metrics. I'm a member of, we're owned by a private equity firm, Vista Equity, that also owns about 80 others. So we got to see their metrics compared to ours. All of us in sort of 2023 really started to feel this pressure and challenges on growth, challenges on retention, these types of things. And so I remember a board meeting about a year ago, and so we have a great partnering relationship with our PE partners, and they know this business well. They're close to it, but still, towards the end of the meeting, and a lot of my team was there, and they said, "Hey, listen, Ed, can we just have about a half hour with just you afterwards?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." But in my stomach, I was like, "Oh, this is like getting called to the principal's office." You're like, I'm back in middle school. I'm like, okay, so. So we sat down and they said, listen, this is a tough market. Things are, we started to feel the pressure of that. Fundamentally, competing is harder than it was, the last, decade or so for SaaS and for QuickBase. Like, where are you going? Like, what's your 5-year vision? Like, how do you win moving forward in an environment that we're in and what's going to be different? And so that was the catalyst for us to just dig deep and say this general approach to sort of being everything to everybody, selling everybody would come ask, like, sure, we can solve that problem. I remember my first couple of months of going on sales calls to get to know the product and our buyers. And And one day we're in a manufacturer and we're talking about quality control. The next day I'm at a construction company. The next day I'm at a retailer. I mean, every day was a different problem. And I was like, how are we going to be great at this? This is like improv jazz, every sales call. Like, how do we get that focus? And we realized we never really took the time to really say, like, what are we great at? How do we get narrower and get more specific? And who are our best customers? We had 12,000. Where do we win? Where do we expand? Like, what are those areas that we compete better than others? And so we dug in and we spent a lot of time looking at it. And the patterns started to emerge, not when we looked at necessarily just the industries or the customer sizes, but the problem sets that we were really good at, the work, like the use cases. And that's where we started to say, okay, there's an opportunity for us to handle these verticals. There are things that we do particularly well that they can't get solved in other places. And so we did a bunch of sort of qualitative, quantitative sort of digging in there. And at the end of it, it was galvanizing. And literally my team and I just wrote a 3-page, 5-year vision statement. And people talk about those and they can sometimes be kind of hokey and corporate. This was actually pretty galvanizing because we had to make a lot of choices of what we were going to stop doing, what types of customers we're going to focus on, where we're going to put investments and build our product, our go-to-market, everything. And it was about the beginning of this year that we really locked that down. And that has been the catalyst for so much for us. And it's been exciting. And it's something that it was a friend, a CEO of another great company I have tremendous respect for, it said, listen, every once in a while, you've got to do something that's not an operating plan for a year or the quarterly plan, like a far out view of where you take a business. And it was
and what was something surprising about that plan that had you not gone through a more formal process to really define your vision, where you headed, that like you would have missed it or you would have seen it? That like sometimes people say like, oh, we're just, we're writing down obvious stuff, but sometimes it sort of lets you see something you wouldn't otherwise see. Is there something in that plan that just like kind of blew you away or surprised you?
Sort of. I would say this. I would say, and this is a lesson I've learned going through this sort of stepping in to help lead transforming businesses. You want to believe it's a process of invention. It's not. You don't come up with the idea. I found it's much more like discovering. Like the idea was in plain sight the whole time. And people, smart people, a lot of times people closest to the customer, there was this one team in sales, they're just very organically was focusing on certain types of construction customers. And they were landing many more of them than the rest of the sales team. They were averaging much bigger deals. And it's just quietly they were going along because they had just figured out there's certain things in that industry that if we showed up and demonstrated we could solve that problem set, they were having more success versus our very sort of general approach that the rest of the sales team was taking. So first and foremost, I think it was with all the quantification and everything else, it was like getting closer to people, close to our customers. A lot of them knew what to do. It was more like uncovering it, giving them that voice. It was then empowering us to lean in as a company against that. So that was a big one, the discovery versus invention. Like I think people come in thinking they've got to have the idea. And in this case, I've never found that to be, maybe I'm not the guy with the idea, but I've found discovering the people that are already on the team is where it usually sits. And it's usually kind of in plain sight. I'd say the second was, and this is why it was culturally hard to shift to this vertical approach from having been a very horizontal tech approach to the market.
Well, and when you're a platform, right? By being a platform, part of your specialty is we can do all of this. We're a platform. Do with us what you want. So it's unique to that business.
And also that's why that was a little bit just kept pulling us back and well, don't get too specific. Oh, so the next thing was these sacred cows, like these sacred beliefs, I should say, that we had as a company were blocking us. And so one of them was exactly that we just said, like, we're a platform. Don't talk about specific ways to use us. That's too limiting. That's too narrowing. Like, don't just talk about all the things they could do. And ultimately, we still are a platform, and our best customers use us for dozens or hundreds of different specific use cases. But you can't land as a platform. That general story just isn't, the value isn't clear enough from the beginning. So first and foremost, our storytelling, the way we presented ourselves, the way we demonstrated value, and everything from a POC to just initial discovery call with a prospect was get to a specific issue they have target specific known problems in certain customer types that we can be really good at. And so that was a big belief change for us.
Well, yeah, and it's almost I kind of describe it like sort of like me first versus you first, describing the value proposition. When you're a platform, that's a little bit self-serving because, you know, that's for your benefit. You're a platform. We can do a lot of things. Look at us. That's a very sort of me first idea, but you first is usually the end customer doesn't care, doesn't have a use case with, they care that you're a platform. They care that they have a specific problem. So that's like saying like, we're going to really prioritize sort of customer centric solutions. And that's maybe problems because usually, like, I don't know, a tech team, it's exciting to be a platform. It's exciting to see how people are using us, but yet sometimes that gets in the way of scaling growth.
Yeah, I very much so. I also think we're talking about like land versus expand, and I think at the end of the day, landing is much more by getting after a specific issue that you can rapidly demonstrate that you can solve it for them. So speed is what they're really trying to get after quick these days. I don't know if it's always this way. It's definitely that way now, and definitely during this sort of much more scrutinous period that we're in, and people are, buying environment we find ourselves. That said, after we've done 2 or 3 applications for people, our platform story comes back into play because then, you're doing these applications around employee health and safety or environmental health and safety. You're doing these applications around large program management for your industry. You're doing these things around quality control. There's certain areas that we play particularly well. But then you say you could be doing these others as well on the same platform, and it won't cost you more. It's all part of this larger platform, sort of consumption model you're already a part of. And so then the platform becomes relevant to them. And it's not just about you. It actually does come into play. It's not the way to get in the door. It's the way to show them more enhanced value over time.
So what is your advice for other CEOs and organizational leaders in just like being a company backed by private equity? What do you have to do differently? How do you have to communicate differently? You've obviously, it seems like you've done it a few times now, have a good working relationship with private equity. How does that change things? What should people be aware of and how you have to adjust what you're doing?
Yeah, I think this standard is actually coming back into other even earlier stage companies than it used to be. I mean, I think growth at all costs has been sort of uncovered is not the end all be all. And it's not in terms of I think for a long time, if you could grow at 30 or 40%, it doesn't matter if you're losing money hand over fist. I don't think anyone's really getting away with that these days. I mean, maybe certain AI early stage things have a little bit of respite, but so I think there's just a general approach to being a well-run business and to have a balance of growth and profitability. I think that's kind of the fundamental. One of the things I think that and I don't know if this is all PE firms, but definitely our partners, they're usually still challenged to say, listen, be rational, grow and sort of do it in an approach that's rational and reasonable. But they also push us to take bigger chances at the same time, be all in, look at really exciting. We bought 3 companies and one of them was transformational for us. They're like even this notion of verticalization. They're like, don't dabble, go all in, verticalize some of your products, verticalize your go-to-market, verticalize the structure of your sales organization, bring in thought leaders and champions, spend some real money to dominate those chosen verticals. So we've been pushed to be rational by our PE partners and do things in a way that's profitable growth. But at the same time, I think a lot of the feedback that I've often received is, but don't dabble in things. If we believe in it, then let's go for it. Let's invest and let's be successful there. And so that's been great. I mean, that's been a great partnering. That's probably something it was more so than I would have expected coming into sort of working in the PE world. I would have thought it would have been more conservative in some ways. I think for rational big bets that are well justified, I think they're all in.
And what is some of the, most challenging decisions you've had to make as CEO? What are things that have been the most stressful? Where has it sort of taxed your abilities in the role?
It's this movement towards verticalization was big because it had so many implications to how we organize, to our product portfolio, our roadmap, to the channel partners we picked, to even just our M&A strategy. There was a lot, and there was definitely a lot of time to culturally bring people along. So I think I mean, management would be easy if it weren't for the people. It's like the famous old line, it's all about working with folks. It's all about bringing in people. I think proactively making sure you're making tough choices. Are people really in the right roles? Are there better roles for them? Really being direct. I think there's been so much of an environment about, and I think that people grow up in not giving direct feedback and candid feedback on performance. And I think you have to tell people where they're succeeding and where they're not, and help them to try to get there, but be direct with them on that. And that's hard. I'm just a friendly Midwestern guy learning how to be super direct on performance and hold people accountable and standards. Those are hard things. And I think, and sometimes people aren't used to hearing it because they've spent a lot of time not getting that kind of input. And I think that as leaders in high performance environments, if it's startups, if it's sports teams, you name it, I think the leaders that succeed are the ones that are willing to be fair but candid and direct with people, and really and sometimes take big chances on young aspiring people because they just have so much potential talent and they're willing to really lean in. And so I think that's most of my most exciting and rewarding but most challenging decisions have been around people. And not just leaders, but people around our organization.
And where are you on this journey now towards like kind of the sort of embracing, vertical industries and sectors? How has the business responded? It's, we're in a very uncertain economic time, but maybe, a few macroeconomic conditions like, okay, maybe we'll get a little bit of a boost to the economy and other things, but where are you in the journey in all of that? How far along are you towards your vision?
This year's been busy, and like it was that, and it wasn't just as a document because there's a lot of different forms and formats. And I literally last week I was visiting our Bulgaria team, I was visiting our London team. A month and a half ago I was in India visiting our team there, getting around the country. Like there is, I think about the superpower of a CEO. I think one of them has to be in galvanizing people behind a big idea. And that takes time and energy and saying things 10 different times in 10 different ways, finding ways that people leverage so it can really, really understand and internalize and get excited about. And so a lot of it was once we really set this direction was getting people on board with it, getting them excited about it, getting to see how it had to change how they thought about selling, or if they're in marketing and positioning, if they're in, competitive environment, if they're in product, like it changed everything. And getting people really on board with that, that galvanizing, that energy, that's a huge part of it. Again, it's probably the most exciting part of the job, I think. It's also probably the most exhausting because it just takes a lot of time, virtually and face-to-face time. And I think that when I look at where people are, when I hear and sort of track, we do our quarterly business reviews and sort of see people are really getting behind it. You see it in terms of our products. We're starting to see more and more. We've been launching sort of specific pro apps for these industries have come out where we've built vertical solutions around AI capabilities in manufacturing, construction, two of the biggest verticals that we're targeting right out of the gate. You're starting to see it show up in product. We reorganize our sales teams into verticals with outside talent, in some cases from those verticals to help lead those. And so you're starting to see the face of our organization. We brought in a new board member who had spent 20 years in these industries. And we just wanted that perspective at the board level, as well as a lot of the different folks in sales and marketing who just knew these industries, knew the language of this, knew those customers. Our services and CS, a lot of those teams and processes have changed to support this. So there's a lot that's underway. We're starting to see the change. We're starting to see it show up. We spent a lot of time in getting much more media coverage around these specific industries. We're starting to see a lot more of like inbound from customers that we're starting to be known to be good at solving their particular types of problems. We're starting to see our customers in those spaces stand up and build their own sort of user groups and customer advisory boards. And so I think we're still early days. We're starting to see the performance show up in sort of bookings growth and retention and things like that. But we're really going to stay on these two verticals specifically, probably for quite a while before we think about others that probably do make sense for us to get into over time.
And those two verticals are, one is construction, is that right?
Construction, yep. And the other's manufacturing. And they're very different on the one hand, but they're very similar on the other. Lots of different people, lots of people in the field, lots of equipment, materials, big, massive projects that they're working on. Lots of people working with different antiquated systems. They're trying to make sense of way too many. I talked about earlier point solutions and SaaS solutions. And candidly, they're a little bit behind in terms of digitization and automation, and they need help. They need tools like QuickBase to help them get there, both pre-built and platforms to expand. And so, and we've disproportionately seen a ton of success, even just in the time that we've been focusing on them.
And finally, what is your advice for those that it sounds like, you have a vision, now you're down the path towards executing on that vision. What about those that your maybe final piece of advice for those that, maybe don't know where they're headed yet? What can they do to find that? You've mentioned maybe doing a little bit more discovery than invention and listening a bit more, but what else is your advice for CEOs that are trying to figure out what their next 3 to 5 years might be?
My sense is that the answer is there. Like somebody in their customer base that they have as a customer, some of their customer facing folks that are hearing these customer problems every day. Like it is getting in front of those teams and hearing it. I think that both here at my last 2 companies, there was always an answer that was in plain sight. And it was usually some assumption or some sacred belief that was blocking people from actually really, really wrapping their arms around it, really going for it. So either listen to those people and or find what are sort of stated assumptions that everybody just takes to be true. There's probably something misleading or off in one of those assumptions that's blocking people from seeing another path. So that we I thought that we were going with the question was the other side. Like now that we've got the idea, now that we've galvanized people around it, now it's just the tenacity of like, how are we doing? Where are we going? Like, what did we do this week? Did we add any pipeline?
And is maybe an other side to your point of the question, is that willpower? Is that metrics? Is that accountability? Is that, I don't know, having the right people in place that are naturally just like, competitive and go-getters and don't want to fail? Like, what is it to actually execute on the vision?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think for me though, like we also have to know what we're great at and what we need to surround ourselves with people who are better at certain things than we are. And so if mine is about sort of helping with that ideation, getting that idea and galvanizing around it, we definitely, between our CFO, our COO, between our head of operations, we have some great operators in this company. And they are really helping us, the cadence around it, the metrics around it, like tracking around it, like that persistence. Everyone looks at sales as like just a weekly forecast, monthly, delivery, quarterly results. You can almost make every function that metricable, every function have a cadence that's structured. And you see things get better. We've seen it in development where we've just been that regular in how we're tracking and holding them accountable. We see it in marketing. We see it in just generally in the business as a whole. So for my sake, it was, or for our ability, it was surround yourself, in my case, with people who are better at operating and really have that tenacity and that follow through to make sure we're actually delivering on this vision that we set.
Well, thank you so much. Ed Jennings, CEO of QuickBase, setting forth maybe a new vision of where to go, and now just executing every day, every week, every month, every quarter on that vision. We really thank you for joining us and can't wait to see where things head next for QuickBase.
Sounds so good. Thank you, Ben.